It's been a crazy last week for you, and that's probably putting it lightly. How would you define the past week since news broke that UConn was leaving the conference?
Well, we've been through it before, but it is not remotely the same. It's not even close to what it was 7 years ago. We're a strong, powerful conference now. We're well established. We'll move on from this. Not going to change anything we're doing. Not going to, change our commitment to competing at the highest national, and I stress national level in football, men's and women's basketball, Olympic sports, where we're also very good. We're going to continue to move forward with our Power Six campaign and certainly pursue our autonomy goal. As you know, football drives a lot of this, and we are really, really strong in football. We'll probably even be stronger in football down the road. You turn a problem into an opportunity. At basketball, probably what's been camouflaged, fellas, in this is that we're really a good basketball league. UConn hadn't contributed much to our basketball. I think they're going to get better, and I think they would have been a factor in our league. But the fact is, even without them, we're going to be really good in basketball. Again, I think we're viewing this as business as usual. Let's get through the exit process, and let's just continue to move forward. Obviously, and I'm sure you'll want to talk about it, we have some decisions to make on membership. But other than that, I think, we're in the best shape we've been in our history.
What would be some of the contributing factors to why you would perhaps want to replace UConn as a 12th member in at least football only?
Well, we're not anxious to do anything. And, the only time we would even think about it is if a school would bring additional value in terms of our brand, in terms of our strength, in terms of TV, in terms of a cultural and strategic fit for the future. If somebody that really had those attributes were to call us, and they would have to call us. We're not calling anybody. I want to make it very clear to everybody. We're not reaching out to anyone. If people, they know our phone number. If anybody's interested in us, they'll call us. And if they don't, then it means they weren't interested to begin with. The point is, we will, be very judicious. We'll be very deliberate about this. The other point I would make, and there's no smugness here, believe me, we have worked too hard to build a tremendous conference and brand, both in football and basketball and Olympic sports, to essentially do anything to diminish us at all. We're only if somebody really adds something would we even consider it. But if somebody did, there's no reason why you wouldn't take the call and at least discuss it. The other thing I want to mention is we're not raiding other conferences. We have no interest in that. I don't want to keep all these schools, in the G5 who might be interested in us on tenterhooks. We know there's going to be significant interest, or already has been, because obviously we have a great TV deal. We got a vastly more money than we got before. We have the best exposure of any conference, and we have good. Our exposure rivals the P5 without question. We've got great exposure, especially in football, with ABC, ESPN. Our championship game's been on ABC, 4 or 5 straight years. So we know that we've got a lot going for us. But we also realize that we've got to protect what we have and do the right thing by the membership. My job is to make sure we make the right decisions for them, and we'll be deliberate. I think, by the way, we will probably know, fellas, within 2 or 3 weeks when we meet in Newport, Rhode Island, for our media day, which direction we're likely to go in. I think, this is... it's a process that we'll talk about. But the other thing I would reiterate is we can stay at 11. We're very happy at 11. We got 11 good schools. And basketball, as I said, we're really good in basketball, too. We don't need to worry about basketball, even though we are losing UConn.
Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, with us on BYU Sports Nation. When that news about UConn broke, it took all of about 0.4 seconds for BYU fans and many national pundits to say, hey, BYU's a football independent. They might be a perfect fit for the American Athletic Conference with the parameters that you just laid out. Would BYU, hypothetically speaking, be a desired fit for your conference?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Here's what I would say, though. BYU is obviously a great program. It's a great national program. It has a ton of history. I go back 30 or 35 years with BYU from my days at ESPN. In the 80s, I put BYU on a lot. I've been out there. I've spoken to the Cougar Club on more than one occasion. I've been treated, like royalty out there. Everybody there has been wonderful to me. Tom Holmoe's a close friend. Kevin Worthen, the president, has been terrific. We have just enormous respect for BYU, and I have great affection because I go back to, obviously, to the days when, BYU, played in the old WAC, and obviously Glenn Tuckett was a close friend. We all revered Lavelle. There's just so much history there. So I can't say enough good things about BYU. But having said that, we've got a lot of thinking to do about this. But by the way, BYU has shown no interest in joining a conference, none, zero, from what we can see. And again, there are some schools, and I'm not going to go into it. If they called us, we would certainly listen. We would certainly talk to them. Geography is always an issue in these things. It's not the decisive thing. It probably was with San Diego State years ago when they and Boise were going to come in. And once Boise decided not to, they wanted their own TV deal. We wouldn't let them do it. They couldn't do it and stay in our conference, just as UConn's not going to be able to stay in our conference in football. We decided that San Diego State was just too much of an outlier out on the West Coast. Just didn't make sense. Football, you can do things that you can't do in basketball because in our case, you only have 4 road games because we play an 8-game schedule. We're going to continue to play an 8-game schedule because obviously we need those non-conference games. We play, in the next 10 years, we're going to play over 150 games with the P5, and we're still adding them, so it will be considerably even more. And what that means is each school will likely have 2 or 3 a year with the P5, which means you need those 4 games. You need to balance out those games against the P5. So we're going to stick, whether we stay at 11 or whether we add a team, we're going to stick to the 8-game conference schedule. And that means travel isn't quite as significant as it is in basketball. And obviously, when you have somebody in a time zone that's distant, it's a factor, but it's not the decisive factor. We're not looking to add a Northeast team, for example, just to be in the Northeast. We're looking to add value if we add anyone at all. And I would say right now our inclination is we could stay put. We don't need to do anything. Fortunately, we have built our programs, we have built our brand, and we've got great teams in both sports and women's basketball. And they were overshadowed by UConn because they're so good in women's basketball. They're not going to lose to anybody in any conference they play in. So anyway, that's where we are on this, and we'll see what happens.
The campaign to be a Power 6 conference is really interesting, given that the Big East was one, and then there was a rebrand, and the Big East is a basketball league, separate and whatnot. So is there any way that the Power 5 is going to let the American be validated and sanctioned as a power conference in the future? Like, is there anything the American Athletic Conference can do?
We think so. We think it's inevitable. We think we're obviously getting closer to them every day. We've had almost 40 P5 wins. We play them. We win. We've been in 4 of the 6 New Year's Day bowls. We've won 3 of them. Would have won 4 if Mackenzie Milton had been healthy in all likelihood. We've done everything we need to do. We're really good in basketball. Our schools are big. We're in big markets. We have all sorts of benefits. It's going to happen. I just don't know when, and we'll knock the door down eventually, I believe. I really do believe that. I don't think they can keep us out because the whole system's going to lack credibility if we're clearly a P6, and I think we are. They'll say, well, you don't have the resources we have. Well, guess what? The new TV deal gives us enough resources to compete at an even higher level than we've been competing at, and we've done pretty well with the revenue we had, which was, relatively small compared to what we'll get. Pac-12 doesn't get anywhere near the revenue that the SEC or the Big Ten gets, or the ACC will get. But they're nevertheless a P5 conference. We have an interesting group of schools that in the new world of college football, in the new world of social media, of cable television, of great exposure, have really distinguished themselves and really made great strides and have become something that they weren't maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And fellas, that's because of the conference they're in. They've done it in the American. You saw what UCF's done the last 2 years. They've become a certified grade A national brand. Houston has done unbelievable things. Memphis, twice on beautiful sunny Saturdays, they upset Ole Miss and they upset UCLA on ABC. National TV. That did a lot for their brand. And Memphis, was not, they always had good football, but it wasn't at this level. Same thing with Cincinnati and others. When this league got formed, I always felt it had great potential if it stayed together, and that's been proven out.
Mike Oresco, commissioner of the AAC, with us on BYU Sports Nation on a Friday. As far as a football-only proposition goes, with the likes of BYU or another school, how open are you to adding just a football member to make the football conference 12?
We'd be open to it, but we're not. We're not committed to it by any means. We're open to it, but I think we are also extremely open to staying at 11. If we stay at 11, we'd need a waiver, but we think we can get it from the NCAA to play a championship game. We're not going to give up our championship game under any circumstances. It's too valuable for all sorts of reasons, including to ESPN. But if we played a championship game with our two best teams, for example, and we did a schedule similar to the Big Ten's, that they did for 20 years with Penn State. And by the way, we've talked to the Big Ten office. We have good friends there, and they've told us how they did it and how they preserve certain rivalries like Ohio State, Michigan. We would absolutely have to maintain UCF, USF every year. Houston, SMU is a Texas rivalry we'd probably want to maintain. It's totally doable. We'd need the waiver, and we'd say to the NCAA, and it would be an FBS decision, why wouldn't you want to give us a waiver and probably pass legislation? Because, first of all, it should be our business how we determine our champion, not somebody else's. Second, why would you encourage us to add a 12th team and raid another conference, perhaps, in order to get a championship game? Why would you encourage us to jettison a team to get back to 10 because you can play a championship game with 10? A lot of this is arbitrary. The legislation has been piecemeal. It's been done on the basis of, okay, the Big 12's got a problem. Let's solve it by passing legislation. The Sun Belt has a problem. Let's solve it by passing legislation. That's the way it's been done. And we would say, look, why don't you just pass a rule that allows people to do it the way they want to? And in lieu of that, we would certainly want to have legislation or a waiver at the outset to be able to play with 11 teams and still play a championship game when we don't do a round robin. We're clearly not going to do a round robin with 11 teams. And we want to preserve the 8-game schedule for the reasons I enumerated earlier. So I think it's all doable. I don't know which way we'll ultimately go. I have an inclination that we'll be likely to stay at 11. And as I said, if people call us and it makes sense, we'll listen. And I'm not mentioning, people ask me about teams in the G5. I didn't want to mention anyone. The last thing I want to do, fellas, is rile the college community. We're not going to keep conferences on tenterhooks. If in 3 or 4 years, for example, there was a team that emerged that really wasn't there now, you could argue that UCF wouldn't have been there 10 years ago, but look at them now. I think we would entertain, if they had an interest in the conference, and they would have to have an interest in us, we would entertain that. But I don't think we need to, and we're fortunate that we don't need to. And I say this, again, without any smugness. We know how good we are. We know how hard we've worked to get there, and I don't think there's any way we would do anything that didn't enhance our brand.
Mike, it's great to talk to you. Incredible points you bring up. We appreciate you in your busy schedule taking time to answer some tough questions and questions that really are tough to answer. So, as always, you're a class act. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that, Spencer and Jaron. And by the way, again, I just want to say hi to the community there and to BYU because, again, we have that wonderful relationship. I wouldn't want anybody to read anything into that, but I just want to, again, say that we do have a great friendship with Tom and with, Kevin Worthen and all the people there. And, again, compliments to the community, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, Mike.
Take care.
Mike Oresco on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, your values, your timeline, your financial future.